Backyard Green Films is proud to present this episode of Agri-Culture with your host, Alara Bowman. Alara and her husband Rick travel throughout the land in their teardrop trailer that they have nicknamed Maggie, bringing you stories about their travels and the people they meet. They visit farmers, ranchers, and just about anyone who loves putting their hands in the dirt or their feet in stirrups. For the past 3 years, they have been filming a documentary about heritage breed animals entitled The Holstein Dilemma: Heritage Breed Animals and the Need for Biodiversity. In those travels, they have gotten to meet some very interesting people. Here's one of those interviews.
Hi, I'm Alara. This episode of our podcast is from our interview with Bob Doxy of the Lazy Beady Donkey Farm in Missoula, Montana. Bob raises American Mammoth Jack Donkeys, and we met up with him at his farm one morning at dark 30 for coffee and conversation. Bob is quite a character to keep up with, especially at that hour and especially prior to my third cup of coffee. That wild braying sound you'll hear in the background is Highlander the donkey wanting breakfast. After our interview, Bob walked us out to the front and said, "Let me show you my ass." The ass had long ears and made lots of loud noises. A very interesting looking animal, and you can't stop wanting to stare at the size of the ears. Bob was an incredibly gracious host, and he and his family fed us lunch afterwards, and that was including some delicious jalapeno jelly, and then took us horseback riding to see the countryside in beautiful Montana. It was a fabulous day. We've taken some interesting jaunts around North America, but this was quite a surreal trip. We flew into Spokane the first evening, interviewed Bob the next morning early, spent the night in Billings that night, and got up at 3 o'clock in the morning to hit the line of totality for the super eclipse in Casper, Wyoming the next morning. Half of Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming were on fire at the time, and between little sleep, lots of driving, the sun disappearing, and Bob's ass, it sure felt like the end of the world might be upon us. It still makes me smile just thinking of how interesting life can be. Here's part of our interview with Bob Doxy and Highlander the donkey at the Lazy Beady Donkey Farm in Missoula, Montana.
What's the matter, buddy? The girl's getting all the attention? I'm Bob Doxy, and we raise Mammoth Jack stock at the Lazy Beady Donkey Farm.
So tell me a little bit about your farm, including the region and the climate here.
Okay, we're in Missoula, Montana. The interest here, as elsewhere, is in mules. And in order to make mules, you need donkeys, and we provide the donkey. They're used exclusively, historically, for mule production, not for riding. So they're big enough to ride, but very few people historically use them for riding or draft animals. All they did was make mules. That's what the American Mammoth was produced for.
So tell us a little bit, if you had to explain to the layperson about the difference between a mule, a donkey, and a horse. If you could explain a little bit about the animal itself and then how they differ from each other.
Okay, well, of course, a horse is a horse, and a donkey is a donkey, and a mule is a hybrid. It's half horse and half donkey. The mule is specifically male donkey and a female horse. If you have a hybrid that's a female donkey and a male horse, it's called a hinny. Any equine can interbreed, although it's not natural. But for example, we can breed zebras, and a zebra and a horse would be a zorse. A zebra and a donkey would be a z-donk. So there's lots of different combinations that people have tried. But the most successful interbreeding is the male donkey, a jack, with a mare. And that produced an animal that is very common, even still today, but in its heyday for work animal horse donkey combination makes a mule. So.
Now, there's a lot of variety in horses. So,
Sure.
if you could explain why why some people might want to make a mule that's a combination of a draft horse and
Okay.
a donkey, or
Sure.
a riding horse.
Well, the American Mammoth was developed because most donkeys are smaller animals than horses. And so the American farmer, in his desire to have the best work animals in the field, bought essentially all of the large jack stock from Europe. And actually, all of it. They imported boatloads of donkeys. And these animals were bred for size, and they were bred up until the American Mammoth was developed. And the reason they needed a large donkey, artificial insemination wasn't the norm at the time. And they needed donkeys that were large enough to breed draft animals. The European farmer stayed with horses. The American farmer stayed with or developed the American Mammoth so that they could farm with mules. Well, you say, why would somebody take a perfectly good, say, Percheron and breed it to this silly-looking jack and make a mule when they could work the Percherons? Well, here again, the American farmer, very successful in his ideas and endeavors, he realized that a donkey lives approximately 40 years, a horse approximately 20 years, and so the mule being half and half, you'd get 30 years, a tremendous increase in the work life. Additionally, mules work in better teams than horses. If you see a horse hitch of 8, that means 8 horses working together as draft animals. You've got a big hitch. 20 mule team borax is an example of 20 mules working together, and they're more trainable, and so more production out of a mule than the horse. Additionally, a mare horse, a female horse, being used for breeding is not available to work. Mules are sterile, and so 100% of the offspring could go to work, where half of the offspring in the European picture would be kept in the barn to produce more horses. So here again, the American farmer was on the cutting edge, I'd say.
Structure of, I guess you would call it the drivetrain. Is there a different place where the weight is distributed on a mule that withers, or is there a different construction on a donkey that would help that mule to be more effective at pulling?
There is. The donkey's chest is narrower than a horse, if you look at it. The build on a donkey is different. When we look at Highlander, you'll see that his hind end is huge. He's an enormous. He's got big legs and just an enormous animal. Where with a horse, the distribution is different. A lot of people look at a donkey and they go, "Oh boy, what a skinny little thing." Well, it's the combination of the horse and the donkey that we're looking at. Not the donkey was never used in a work capacity. His only job was to produce mules. That's the only, because here again, 100% of the mules are sterile. So you can't really get a good mule and, wow, my neighbor's got a good mule, and you can make a good mule like you can with horses. You have to come back to the donkey owner. In the heyday, I think around 1920, there were 5.2 million donkeys to produce the mules that they needed in the United States. 5.2 million registered. They were all registered only black with white points, which is the type of breed that we have. the color configuration. They're the same animal if they're spotted or whatever. But in that day, you know, you needed to have a black donkey like Highlander will be when you see him. The numbers today are somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 5,000 registered mammoth. Black with white points are even more rare. So these particular donkeys, that there were so many of them, are indeed endangered. There's no question in my mind. We tried to find a Jenny last month, and we just couldn't find one. I mean, they're not out there. Registered with some sort of a history. You know, it's just like registering your dogs. You get the history of them, not so much that my dog's better than your dog. It's the history. So there's lots of donkeys out there, lots of large donkeys, but few registered that have a genetic background. What's happening is the gene pool is going away. A lot of people say, well, you know, you can raise donkeys. Yeah, we can get 2 a year out of our 2 Jennies, and so if 2 a year die, you're not gaining. The gene pool is disappearing. So what we do is we bring in these smaller donkeys and we put them into that gene pool. Well, genetically, the animals are beginning to change, and you just can't find these particular animals.
This is kind of interesting, and this is considered a critically endangered animal from the livestock conservancy because of that very thing that you were talking about. But it's an interesting mix because this is how the animal came into being in the...
He wants to get fed.
I thought we had an air raid siren.
No, he's pretty vocal.
But this is how the animal came into being, is the mix of 5 or 6 different breeds of donkey initially.
Right. That's the European. The American farmer bought all of the large jack stock out of Europe, cleaned it out, literally. So the gene pool can't be reestablished because a lot of these animals are extinct. Like a lot of animals that were brought and imported from Europe to the United States in the earlier years. Once the particular breed was bought up or used up, I mean, they just disappeared from the face of the earth. They don't exist.
Yeah, you say over time, is this George Washington we're talking about? He was...
Absolutely, yeah. He was the father of the American Mammoth. The breed was developed from European stock, and the father of our country is, the way we see it in our industry, the father of the American Mammoth, and that's George Washington. He was given large jack stock. I don't remember the name of his particular jack, but he traveled through the colonies at the time, or the new states, and began to develop that breed. Yeah.
My understanding is 1788. Is that about right?
I'm sure. I don't remember how old he is, but he's at least that old.
Over time, it's gone through some changes too. It's my understanding that I think in the 20s, the breed standard changed. So if you could explain any knowledge that you have about the American Mammoth Jack, the registry that they have, and the purpose and how it's changed over time.
Well, of course, you know, if you have a registry with 5 million animals in it, and today you have very few left. The registry had to change to accommodate what was being used and what was available. I'm sure at the time they were very specific in, like I was saying earlier, black with white points as a registerable donkey. Well, all the donkeys weren't that way. There were plenty of large jacks out there that weren't black with white points, for example. Today, anything of size, anything that meets a certain size standard is registerable. Also, there are now 2 registries for jacks. We register with the American Mammoth Jack Stock Registry. I think that's important. There were some changes. I'm not really familiar with that. I know that. Go ahead.
My understanding is that in the earlier time they liked the black coloring because they match as teams when you
Right.
put them with a Percheron. You get
Absolutely.
a mule that was black.
Absolutely. I think, you know, that typical picture of a mule working in the fields was a black mule. You'll see a couple of them out here. They'll have a red nose. They pick up some of the characteristics of the horse, some of the characteristics of the donkey. And so this was the mule being produced. It was a Percheron Mammoth cross, the Percheron mare, the Mammoth Jack. And so you say, well, what happened if these animals were such fabulous animals? Whatever happened to them? Why are we down to a few thousand remaining in the world? Well, it's pretty simple. It's called the John Deere tractor. Once the people discovered the efficiency of a tractor, they no longer needed to keep all these large animals. These things eat as much as a horse. They're really enormous. Highlander weighs way over 1,000 pounds. And they're expensive to keep. And why feed all these millions and millions of jacks when you can buy a tractor?
So to go to the team thing, is there a difference in shape and size, and does that impact how they hitch together?
Well, the sorrel mule is used in our area here for packing, and mules are real common. You know, you see them in Forest Service use still today. Right up the road here at 9 Mile, you might want to visit the Reed Mountain Station, and this is one of the places in the United States where they raised and managed mule herds, and we still have one in Missoula. Really interesting, but the sorrel mule is a lot more common today than the black mule, because the black the original gene pool of black with white points, like Highlander, is so rare that they just went to that. Percherons may have been better suited for draft, and the sorrel mules are definitely more desirable for packing, although we pack our blacks.
So now I've read a little more in my time, and it's my understanding that they used to have the I believe it was the Kentucky mules, that one of the characters in the families in there used to raise because they have an endurance, and so they used them as riding as well. They're very famous riding mules in certain areas. Obviously, maybe not the Mammoth Jack stock that we see here, but mules can be ridden as well.
Well, you know, the thing about riding mules, if you do your homework on people like Wild Bill Hickok and Custer and different people that came into the West, the mule was a very popular riding animal because they were for the same reasons. They could work longer, they lived longer. They're a little bit smarter than a horse in that when it's quitting time, a mule just stops. A horse will drop. I mean, you can whip a horse to keep going. A lot of people say, well, why is it that the packers ride a horse and pack the mule string instead of just packing horses? It's not that they can carry more. It's simple. When you ride a horse and you get up to the edge of that precipice, or whatever you call that, the words, and you look over, if you were riding a mule, he'd go, I ain't going down there. And you kick him and he'd go, no, you don't understand, I'm not going. You know, a horse, hey, okay, let's go. And over he goes, you know, and the mules follow. So there was a purpose, but a rumor, I don't know how accurate it is, Custer and I think it was Wild Bill had a riding contest, an endurance contest. Wild Bill rode a mule, which was not uncommon, but you know, our proud forefathers, you know, Custer had a real fine stallion, and they basically ran a 100-mile race, and they won together. They finished together. The difference is Wild Bill got up the next morning and rode off on his mule, and Custer went out and buried his horse. So a horse will continue on, but beyond its own endurance. So
that's one of the things we've been covering is that with many breeds, it's not just a question of the looks of the animal, it is behavioral as well. There are very definitely characteristics that transmit genetically, behaviorally. And when we were reading up on this, one of the things I read was that you tell a horse what to do and you ask a mule.
there you go. That's really a good, yeah, that's very good. They think about things. If you tell your horse to get in the trailer and you can convince him, and he'll get in the horse trailer. But a mule will stand there. I mean, and he'll think about it, look it over, maybe stick his nose in there, and then he'll get in. So he thinks his way through situations. Mules, I consider them to be a little more highly intelligent, but then I'm kind of partial to donkeys, so that's the better half.
So if that's the case, if they think about it, how much does your thought process as the owner, rider, companion to the mule feed in there? Does he trust? Is it a question of trust where he sees if he trusts you and you ask him to do something, he's more likely to do it? Because he says, okay, somebody who thinks about this is saying it's okay.
I think that the mule is, if we consider that it's more intelligent or thinks its way through things a little more, then once it's trained, it's going to be more trustful. In other words, it's going to trust you more. It can think, well, if the boss likes this, I'll go along with it. But there again, when you put it in a situation that it's unfamiliar with, you can't convince a mule. If he's threatened, I don't care how much training you've had, he's staying where he is. They're just more intelligent. They're not going to hurt themselves. Yeah.
That was one of the things I read was that it takes about 10 years to fully train an animal because it's exposure. You have to situationally expose them to these circumstances for them to say, okay, I've been there and I know what that is and now I'll do it.
Yeah, a horse rider, the horse is in its prime at 6, a mule probably at 10. You don't even start to ride a mule until it's 3 to 4, and they race horses at 2, which I think is crazy. But don't forget, you have a tremendous racehorse at 2 years old. He wins the Kentucky Derby. You retire him and you make millions of dollars on his offspring. You have a fabulous mule. He wins the mule races you retire him at 4. Well, why would you retire him? He can't produce any offspring. So what do? You find that jack and you go back to that guy and you say, I've got this fabulous mare. I want to make another $1 million race mule. You got to go to the jack owner. That's job security.
I guess so. Now this is you brought up something interesting, and it sort of feeds into the ability to preserve this breed. And this is not a chicken where you can transport it across the country. This is an animal where if you want it to reproduce, you have to find another jack.
Another donkey. Another mammoth, yes. We transported donkeys to Virginia, California, Alaska. If people want a genetically sound donkey, they have to find a donkey breeder. And if they do, well, just to give you an example, Marcia and I traveled all over the country before we found Highlander. And we spent months doing it because we wanted a specific animal. If you want a big donkey, there's lots and lots and lots of them out there. But these donkeys are genetically as sound as we could find them.
So there's technology out now that might make that easier. And I'm going to ask your perspective on it. Because now you can get stud, you buy semen from other breeders, and you can do artificial insemination from a mammoth in Florida. Ship it here and have it immediately available. Do you think that that's fantastic for preserving the breed, or bad because the ability to naturally breed is a part of what makes these animals what they are, or neither?
The thing is, you know, if in 1920 there were 5 million of these things, and 100 years later, in 2020, there's a few thousand of them, what in the world happened to all of those animals? Well, they were destroyed. They were eaten. Dog food, whatever you want to, however you want to look at it. The fact of the matter is semen collected for a really great bovine is greatly desirable, but we were destroying mammoth jack stock, not trying to preserve them. So we do collect Highlander, and we can ship semen all over the country, overnight it, but it's shipped for insemination into horses, not into donkeys. People don't reproduce these animals. So you say, well, why can't we re-establish? It's my honest belief that the mammoth donkey will become extinct. I don't believe we'll save this animal. The reason is people are really happy with their minis and even their standards. Some people will say, well, I really don't want that big of a mule. I'll just breed to a standard donkey. And they do. So what happens to the mammoth donkey is its gene pool becomes less and less and less until we just don't have that sustainable number any longer. And I believe that in the next generation they'll go away.
So why do you do it?
Why do I do it? Oh, you got to see the breed. I mean, it's a passion. I love the donkey. Yeah, it's just you have to want a donkey. Okay, a lot of people nowadays buy donkeys for riding, large donkeys for riding. A lot of people for draft, for pulling a little wagon. So they go down the parade. But who uses a donkey in the field? Well, whoever used a donkey in the field? Nobody. The 5.2 million donkeys didn't do any work. They just stood around and bred. That's what they were for. So nobody ever rode them. Who would ever be seen riding an ass? I mean, give me a break. Here comes this farmer. He's got 50 mules that he pulls plows with. And you can't do that with horses, by the way. 50 mules dragging a combine. And he comes riding out on a donkey. It ain't happening. He comes riding out on his big American saddlebred, and he wants people to see how successful he is. He doesn't ride an ass. So the donkey today, the people that want to ride donkeys are rare. There are few people that want big donkeys to ride, but there's not enough of them to keep the breed alive. They can do the same riding on a large standard. There's no point in having a large donkey for riding or for draft because people have that same pride issue today that farmer did. Well, how do you like my, I don't know, name your breed, my quarter horse? How do you like my ass? It's just not going to happen. And as the result of that, the donkey goes away more and more. Don't forget, the only purpose of this animal was to make big mules. It was never because it was a great riding animal or really won the dressage or these things. There are donkeys that have done all these things, but people aren't going to go with, even to get a mule into a dressage. It just doesn't happen. It's not going to happen. You got that. I've got it. What are you going to do with that mule? It just won the world champion dressage. Well, I don't know. I guess I'll take it home and ride it some more. You can't reproduce it. It's a dead-end situation. Remember this. When the Lord created horses and he created donkeys, he didn't create mules. Man did that. Okay, if you have over in the Prairie Mountains here in Montana, a wild horse herd, and you have a wild donkey herd, you're never going to have a wild mule herd. Well, why is that? Because donkeys and horses don't breed naturally. So, and even if they do, there goes your whole evolutionary theory. They breed together, they make a better animal, it lives longer, but it's sterile. Ugh. Just Bob.
I get you on that
yeah.
one, I think.
Yeah.
It's an interesting conundrum. You're saying to me, or what I'm hearing, is that anybody that wants substance over style and flash is not necessarily going to want this animal, and I would say we're in short supply of that these days.
The thing is you know, your love for the mammoth donkey is it's a passion, and unless other people have that passion, like you say, well, we can ship semen to Florida, and I can, but nobody in Florida has a mammoth. And if there is one down there, the chances are, all right, here, let me give you the example. We produce, on this little farm, we've produced probably 10 jacks that are really nice breeding animals, and they will never see another donkey. When I sell that animal, I get top dollar for these things. I mean, I cannot raise horses and make the dollars for a baby. My problem is I don't have 1,000 of them, and people won't buy that many. But here's the deal. Somebody they seek me out. They buy a mammoth donkey, and they want black with white points, and I sell it to them for top dollar. It'll never see a jenny. It's taken to a horse farm, and what's it do? It does what they were produced, what the breed was made to do. It makes mules. That's a dead-end deal. So I've sold 10 of these animals, and not one of them, not one of the 10, will produce another mammoth donkey. Now that's where the breed's going, and that's why it'll die off.
So where are the jennies?
They're out there. There's 3 of them. If there's 4,000 or 5,000 of them in the world, 3 of them are standing right out here. The jennies are a little harder for me to sell. I wouldn't say harder. They're not desired. Why is that? Why don't people desire the jennies? They can't make mules. Mammoth's jack stock is made, produced. It was invented, if you want to say that, to make mules. And that's what's done with them today. People buy them from me so that they can make great mules. And they do. And I get calls from people, hey, we had our first baby. Oh, really? Is it a donkey? Oh, no, we don't have any jennies around here.
So yeah, you're just making the cake mix. That's it. You're not making the cake. Somebody else always makes a cake. You're just putting the ingredients.
I'm the guy, you know, like we've said so many times, in the 20s, there were lots of people that had mammoth jack stock. Today, there's just a few old farts that stick around and make more mammoth jack stock. Most people today make big mules. That's what happened to the breed, and it's still happening.
So we got a chance to go to talk to the USDA, Phil Purdy. He runs around and collects all of he collects samples. They collect mostly agricultural, and not mostly, exclusively agricultural animals at the USDA, because they're preserving tissue just in case we have a major issue that goes on. You know, they have a flood or a famine or a disease or something wipes out a good chunk of the stock, so they can recreate the stock. Is there any way you might be able to do that, where you preserve enough of these animals that you might be able to save it?
It's not going to happen. I'm telling you that the American mammoth is going to become extinct. Just like, what is it, the wattle pig and all. There are so many animals that came onto the American farmstead that no longer exist. They just don't. They were better animals in its day, but today a chicken has white feathers. It stands around. A turkey is white feathered. It stands around and waits for the day that it's slaughtered. And they're mass produced, just like cars or anything else. So these animals that were perfect for the American farm, in as much as the American farm no longer exists, neither do the animals. And the donkey is going to be the same way. Everyone, and I'm not the only guy that produces donkeys. Don't misunderstand me. There's plenty of guys out there doing this. Well, not plenty. There's not nearly enough. But their dilemma is the same as mine. I sell a male donkey. It goes off someplace to produce mules. I bought Highlander to produce mules. I just happened to fall in love with the breed, and so I sought out some jennies. Most of the guys don't. Most people that buy them don't. They don't look for jennies because their mule production was what they bought the animal for in the first place.
So you have I saw what 4, 5, 6 horses out there and 1 mule, correct?
No, I have. We haven't gone to the back yet.
So,
We have 2 mules in the back. The mule out front is just he's a baby.
what do you put your mules into? Are they just riding?
We sell them. Yeah. Well, no, we live in Montana. These are usually pack animals, mules.
But you don't. You are going to ride a mule today.
Oh.
So you do ride them.
Yeah, we ride mules.
Okay,
Yes.
So what's your favorite mix for that particular thing? What kind of horse do you put them with?
Gosh, I have some American saddlebreds, so you'll see an American saddlebred mule. We had a Tennessee Walker mare, so you'll see an enormous Tennessee Walker mule. He's just beautiful. You're not going to find a lot of riding stock made with Percherons or Clydesdales because they're just too broad, and just like riding a Clydesdale, they're harder to ride or sit in the saddle for a long time. But I just happen to like the saddlebreds, so we ride them.
Is biodiversity important to you at all, and how does that fit into this animal?
The mammoth jackstock was developed for size. We explained that a little bit ago, so that we could breed bigger horses and have bigger mules. So size was important, but there's a lot more to the donkey than just the fact that he's a big animal. These critters are healthier, they live longer, they do have a lot to contribute. Unfortunately, they're contributing it to a hybrid animal, that is the mule. The breed of mammoths is, it's like people. Some of the offspring we have are not enormous animals like Highlander. Some of the animals are just pretty blah-looking little donkeys. Actually, I can't remember any of them that are, but I mean they're not all genetically the same. That's because the breed has been somewhat polluted with smaller animals that people want to call they want to call a large donkey a mammoth. So when you begin to shop for mammoths online, for example, you're going to be amazed at how many there are. Bob's a liar. The fact of the matter is, when you find the animal, you find that it isn't a mammoth. It's just a really big donkey. That's not a mammoth. This particular breed is something that was developed by the American farmer specifically for a purpose of being a more efficient farmer. And if you just take every big ass that's out there, it doesn't make mammoths. You can breed and breed and breed, but you can't redevelop the gene pool. And that's what I'm saying. The gene pool itself of American mammoths, because when we reproduce the breed, they go for mule production, and it will go away. That's my feeling, and it breaks my heart. But
So, for instance, we have white parks here that are white park cattle that are developed from a European breed, and we might be able to go back to England to get them, and yet there's nowhere else to really go to get a Mammoth Jack but the United States.
That's right. It was developed here, but it isn't even that. When the American farmer imported donkeys from Europe, they were paying such a good dollar for them. They brought boatloads over. There's none left. There's none over there to go bring those animals back together and reproduce to make this particular gene pool. So you can't reproduce what's been deleted. Those animals are already extinct. They don't exist. And that's the problem we have. That's why we can take Highlander to the fair and people say, wow, what a donkey. I didn't know donkeys got that big. Well, your grandfather knew they did. And your great-grandfather actually raised these animals. And now the people that see them can't believe it. That's a donkey? Yeah, that's a burro. It's the same thing as a little burro that's down in Mexico. It's the exact same animal, only it's a really big one. It's the same thing. It's like saying, well, that's a poodle? No, that's not a poodle. That's a mastiff. They're both dogs. Yeah, there's lots of donkeys and burros, and in Europe it's an ass. In the United States it's a donkey. In Mexico it's a burro. They're all genetically the same animal, but this particular breed, this particular gene pool, is the one that we're concerned with, and we really do need people to buy the jennies and reproduce them. People buy jennies, but they use them for draft animals and pets. They're great pets. Big dogs.
We'd like to thank Bob for having us out today. For more information about Bob Doxy and his Lazy BD Donkey Farm, please visit his Facebook page at facebook.com/LazyBD Donkey Farm. Also, please visit the American Mammoth Jack Stock Association at americanjackstock.org. You have been listening to Agri-Culture with your host, Alara Bowman. Please tune in for more upcoming episodes from our travels. We'd also like to thank our producer, Michelle Council. I'm Rick Bowman, your behind-the-scenes editor. Until next time. This has been a presentation of Backyard Green Films Productions, all rights reserved, copyright 2019.